and let's try to construct a habit loop. So for our cue, I'm going to say after drinking a glass of water, and routine is that I'm going to meditate with this balance app on my mobile phone, and as a reward I'm going to be eating a Hong Kong style pineapple bun, and so I'm going to combine them into one complete habit loop, and voila. Hello YouTube, this is Frank from Happy Coder, and today in this video I'll be bringing you guys a very quick high-level overview of the Dnd-kit library, which is a drag and drop utility library for the React ecosystem. And before we delve into the actual overview, let me show you a quick demo of why I decided to incorporate this library into my application. What's my use case of it? So I've been working on building this habit tracker app, which is meant to be a one-to-one faithful implementation of James Clear's Atomic Habits. So I have this, what I'm calling the habit assembly page, where you define your different components of the habits and you can drag and drop them into this assembly area and construct a complete habit loop. So we got our cues, routines, rewards, and we have the cravings, which are, in my opinion, they have one-to-one relationship with the rewards, so they're combined into one entities. And let's try to construct a habit loop. So for our cue, I'm going to say after drinking a glass of water, and routine is that I'm going to meditate with this balance app on my mobile phone, and as a reward I'm going to be eating a Hong Kong style pineapple bun, and my craving is the sugar rush from these delicious little buns. So I'm going to combine them into one complete habit loop, and voila, we have this complete habit loop that has 4 components. We got the cue, the reward, the craving, and the routine. So that was just a very quick demonstration of this very elegant, very modern drag and drop library. So as a high level overview of the entities, we got our DND context, which is a context provider that need to wrap around all the draggable items and the drop zone. And we got our hooks. We got our 2 main hooks. We got the useDraggable and useDroppable. And last but not least, we got our lifecycle methods. We got our lifecycle methods that handle onDrag start, move, and end. And before we delve into the particularities, the details of the entities, just a very quick analogy of how I understood the pattern of Dnd-kit, how Dnd-kit handles drag and drop as part of my mental representation of this library. So instead of, okay, let's say that we have this draggable item that we're dropping into the drop zone. Instead of detaching it from its original DOM position and dynamically reinsert it into the DOM at this new position, so what is actually happening is that when the user is dragging this draggable item around, so when the onDrag move lifecycle got triggered, we need to cache the data of this draggable item in a store, in a state management solution. In our case, I'm using Zustand. And when the user releases this draggable item into the drop zone, when the mouse gets released, that's when the onDrag end method gets triggered. And that's when we need to manually, programmatically recreate another component, another instance of this draggable item with the data that we have cached in the store to rehydrate another instance of it. And my best analogy of this pattern, if you have seen the movie The Prestige, it's very similar to what Nikola Tesla, the fictional Nikola Tesla, built for Robert Angier, or the Great Denton. He built him a teleportation machine where you step into it and the machine is going to basically take all of the data that you're carrying and recreate another instance of you at another location. However, that means that we're going to have multiple instances of you walking around. So that's why we need to programmatically remove this original instance from its original place. In our case, let's say that we have an array of draggable items. We need to find the item with this particular ID and remove it. Otherwise, we're going to have multiple instances of this guy walking around. And that's my best analogy of how the Dnd-kit handles drag and drop. It's very similar to the teleported man, and to be more specific, it's very similar to the fictional machine that Tesla built for Robert Angier that allowed him to perform the teleported man. So with the analogy out of the way, now let's take a look at the actual implementation of the hooks and the lifecycle methods. So like we said before, we mainly have two hooks. We're mainly using two hooks, useDraggable and useDroppable. useDraggable is the hook that you need to wrap your draggable items around. So if we look at the implementation or the actual usage of it in our code, we can see that when we're calling the useDraggable hook, we need to pass in a mandatory string unique ID. This is mandatory. If you have multiple instances, if you have multiple draggable items with the same ID in your drop zone, it's going to throw an error. And this is the data. The data can be an object of any shape. And the data is the thing that we need to cache when we're moving things around, because we're going to use the same data to rehydrate another instance of the draggable item when we have dropped it into the drop zone. And from calling this hook, we're going to destructure a whole bunch of things from this hook. And these are the properties that we need to spread into the element that is going to be dragged around. So listeners gives you a list of event listeners that intercept the mouse interactions, because drag and drop is mainly achieved via interaction with the mouse. And one caveat when you are trying to implement your own mouse event listener to the draggable item. So in our case, we have this manual overlay subcomponent, which allows you to click on save to persist this habit loop in the DB, or to click on explode so that you can take a constructed habit loop apart and reassemble with other habit components. If you have that kind of operation, you need to watch out so that mouse event listeners need to be outside of the draggable item that has this listeners wrapped around it. Otherwise, your custom mouse event listeners are going to be intercepted by the Dnd-kit's default event listeners. So this is why the manual overlay item is on the same level, is a sibling to the actual draggable item, so that they're not interfering with each other. And the setNodeRef or the setDraggableRef function, which I'm renaming here as setNodeRef, we need to assign this function as the value of the ref attribute to the draggable item, so that the Dnd library can use this function to know what are the draggable items. And last but not least, the transform property, when you're moving things around, it gives you a transform object which has the x and y value for your draggable item. And what we need to do is to define our own custom style using the translate 3D property with the transform.x and transform.y, so that after we have assigned the style to the draggable element, we're accurately reflecting its new relevant position in relation to the viewport when we're dragging it around. And comparing to the useDraggable hook, the useDroppable hook is relatively simple. In my use case, I just passed in a mandatory ID. Very similar to the useDraggable hook, we have the setNodeRef function, which we need to assign as the value to the drop zone element's ref property. In my use case, it looks a little more complicated because I'm using forwarding ref, but in reality, without forwarding ref, it should just look something like this. And optionally, we can take advantage of the isOver Boolean value, so that in my case, I'm just using the isOver Boolean value to dynamically change the appearance of the drop zone. So this light green background and the green dash border, we're dynamically changing the CSS appearance of the drop zone using this isOver Boolean value. And in terms of the lifecycle methods, we have onDragStart, onDragMove, and onDragEnd. And the commonality among all these three lifecycle methods is that we can destructure the active and over properties from the appropriate drag events. Active refers to the draggable item that is currently being dragged around, and on that property you can destructure the data, the ID, and the relevant position of that draggable item. And over, it could either be undefined when the draggable element is not colliding with anything, or it could be another draggable element or the drop zone when the library has detected a collision. And if we want to talk about the collision detection strategy, you can refer to the official documentation. There are a couple of different default algorithms that Dnd-kit uses to detect collision, or you can write your own collision detection logic. In my case, I'm just using the most basic rectangular intersection detection logic. And in my opinion, the handleDragMove and the handleDragEnd are the lifecycle methods that are the backbone or the meat of this library. So in my use case, when we are dragging a habit component and hovering it over another one, this effect, this dash outline, or this detection in general, it's happening within the handleDragMove lifecycle method. And the operation of dragging one draggable item into and dropping it into the drop zone, this creation of this new SVG element, we need to do that within handleDragEnd. And lastly, some miscellaneous things that we need to watch out for when we're working with this library. One of them is when you're using scrollable containers, when your draggable items are within a scrollable containers, because these containers all have overflow Y. The overflow Y hidden property is going to interfere with how Dnd-kit works. If you have your draggable items within such a container, it's almost as if you cannot move the draggable item out of the container because of the overflow Y is set to be hidden. So in this case, the official way of handling it is to use a library provided entity called the DragOverlay. And how it works is that it acts as an intermediary presentational component that is detached from the general DOM hierarchy. So it's outside of the structure of your DOMs, who has a position that is relative to the viewport. Because of that, it's not being bound to the scrollable container. So as you can see, when I'm moving this watch HK drama element, this thing that we're seeing right now is actually the DragOverlay, the Dnd-kit entity. It's not the original element. The original element never left this container. And if we look at the definition of this component, we're going to see this is the entity that is provided to us by the library. What we need to do is we need to implement the data and define how it's going to look. So these guys are all habit card components. And I want, when we're dragging this around, I want the Dnd-DragOverlay to look like just another habit card. So that's why I'm wrapping this DragOverlay entity around my habit card component. And habit card component is going to handle all the data that is intercepted from the Zustand store. So just to reiterate, when we're dragging this thing around, we're caching the data in the Zustand store. And the Dnd-DragOverlay intercepts that store's data and uses the data to create a free-floating DragOverlay that is not being bounded to this scrollable container. And the second miscellaneous thing, the second caveat is that when we're using the lifecycle methods provided by the Dnd-kit library, It's tempting to use the active elements x and y values to calculate the position of where it's going to land, but in my opinion it's not very accurate, and it's very convoluted math that we can sidestep. And what I did was I just took advantage of the browser's mouse move event listener. So if we look at my use pointer position hook, as you can see, I'm like whenever I'm dragging this thing around, I'm dynamically adding a mouse move event listener to record the relative position of the cursor. And when I'm finally dropping it into the drop zone, I'm just directly reading the last recorded x and y value of the mouse of the cursor position, and I'm just using that as my definitive position for this new element. I'm not doing any convoluted math based on the provided x and y position provided to us by the lifecycle methods. And I found that to be the most easy, the cleanest to work with. So, and that's it, guys. That's all I want to say about the Dnd-kit library, which in my opinion is a very elegant, very modern drag and drop utility library for the React ecosystem. I hope you found this video to be informative. This video serves as a mental representation for myself as well in the future when I need to refer back to some pointers. And with that said, I'll see all of you in the next video. Bye bye.